In the Warner Mountains, near Adel, Oregon, a sea of sagebrush extends as far as the eye can see. This vast landscape supports ranchers, recreationists, and rural communities. It also supports wildlife. In fact, more than 350 species depend on the sagebrush ecosystem, including pronghorn, mule deer, and the iconic sage grouse. But after a century of fire suppression, trees like the western juniper have spread from the rocky ridges of the Warner Mountains down into the sagebrush sea. In just the past 20 years, more than 1 million acres of sagebrush have been lost to tree encroachment in the Great Basin. This invasion of trees has been happening for decades all over the world. The science shows that this expansion of trees impacts the health and resilience of rangelands, putting wildlife at risk.
By juniper expanding its range, it has impacted a lot of those wildlife species that thrive on open sagebrush areas. So it essentially is habitat destruction for them.
This spread of junipers also impacts the people who live on the land. As stands of trees become thicker, they siphon precious water from streams. They fuel hotter and more severe wildfires, and they replace native plants that livestock feed on.
The juniper was closing in, and I was just kind of watching my ranch slowly disappear before my eyes as the juniper got worse and worse.
Beginning in 2010, private landowners like John O'Keefe teamed up with the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and other state and local partners to reclaim disappearing sagebrush range. Over the next decade, partners worked together to restore 53 square miles of sagebrush country across property boundaries in the Warner Mountains. Leaving the old-growth woodlands alone, partners focused their restoration on recently invaded areas that still contained sagebrush and other native plants. Using chainsaws, they removed young trees from historic rangeland, allowing native plants to rebound quickly.
Here in the Warner Mountains project, we're talking from horizon to horizon restoration, which is what we need to actually get to in terms of conservation of the sagebrush sea.
The partners closely monitored the outcomes of tree removal. They paid special attention to how sage grouse populations fared.
They're really an early indicator of how things are going. So goes the sage grouse, so goes the sagebrush sea. And we really wanted to use that as a barometer of how well our restoration actions were working.
When the Warner project began, no one knew exactly how tree removal would change things. To find answers, scientists from the BLM, NRCS, University of Idaho, and Oregon State University monitored plant and animal species in the area. They also tracked over 400 sage grouse hens over 8 years.
So once we began cutting trees on the landscape, birds' behavior would change where we would see nesting in areas where we hadn't seen nesting before.
What really surprised us is how fast the sage grouse reoccupied those former habitats. They started nesting there almost immediately.
Within 3 years, scientists documented a third of marked sage grouse nested in restored sagebrush habitat. In addition, nest success increased by 19% once trees were cut. As a result, the sage grouse population in the restored areas grew at a rate that was 12% higher than those in neighboring areas with trees.
This is extremely encouraging for the future of sage grouse conservation.
The amount of high-quality sage grouse habitat increased 6-fold after juniper removal. Other wildlife benefited too. For example, researchers found that the abundance of sagebrush songbirds doubled soon after tree removal. And now, ranchers are breathing easier too, with more space and better forage for their grazing cattle.
I really felt like I was getting my ranch back once we really got into doing it at a landscape scale.
Successful restoration projects at this scale are only possible through partnerships.
The main advice I would have is don't be afraid to jump in with both feet. Talk to all your partners, There's other people out there in your community, other agencies that will help you. Bring everybody to the table, talk about what you want to do, talk about your overall broad concept, and it will come together. But don't be afraid to move forward and try something, because it is possible.
Indeed, the resounding success in the Warner Mountains is being replicated in other watersheds across the Sagebrush Sea as partners come together to tackle the problem of tree invasion and achieve similar outcomes. Since 2010, NRCS Working Lands for Wildlife has partnered with over 2,000 landowners in communities across the West to remove encroaching trees from 700,000 acres of rangelands. By working together, we can create healthy, resilient working lands that support people and wildlife for generations to come.
En comunidades totonacas de la Sierra Norte de Puebla, en el Día de Todos los Santos, los sapos empiezan a chillar por 3 o 4 días, se ponen oscuros y se van al monte. Tsurumpitpit es una lagartija o salamandra que canta en la época de lluvias, anunciándolas.
Sí,
¿Qué?
es el Tsurumpitpit.
¿Y cómo es?
Es un pajarito chiquito.
Como lagartija.
Es una lagartija, o sea, lisita, o sea, casi aplastada.
Es lisito, bueno, más o menos mide como, ¿qué será? Como de 10 centímetros. Sí, está pequeñito, no se esconde, nomás rara la vez que lo llegas a ver.
Pues lo que escuchamos es ahora sí el sonido de un salamandra que en totonaco se llama Tsurumpitpit. Pues realmente se escucha cuando quiere llover o está nublado, porque pues según uno de esos animales son los que hacen que llueva, o predicen o llaman a la lluvia.
Mandiyaman Tsurumpitpit, kalak chulak nama kaslipinkiwan, makashkikiliwan, mashtunchukse makandama nama lawakos, an Tsurumpitpit. Samak kinchik kinkachoko, mabinilancho wakchipa.
Pues es como una lagartija, ¿no? Pero lisa. No lo conozco muy bien, pero así es que siempre está en lugares húmedos, debajo de las piedras.
¿Y lo has visto tú?
Una vez, pero no lo sé diferenciar. De hecho, aquí le dicen tlacondete.
Tsurumpitpit.
¿Y cómo es?
Es chiquitita, así como sapo, pero es bien chiquitito. Pero también brinca.
¿Y dónde se ve?
En la tierra, en el suelo.
¿Y en algún momento, en qué momento canta? ¿O cuándo se escucha más?
Se escucha bien cuando llueve. Tsurumpitpit y ya comienza a llover. Un día, 2 días, ya comienza por aguacero.
¿A
Aquí en la comunidad de Tuxtla existen varias ideas de lo que es el Tsurumpitpit. Algunas personas creen que es un grillo, como yo lo pensé en algún momento. Otras personas creen que es una salamandra. Otras personas creen que es un ave. Sin embargo, un vecino aquí de la comunidad, el joven Adauto Jacinto, no se quiso quedar con la duda de saber qué animal emitía ese canto. Y en una noche de lluvia, mientras el Tsurumpitpit cantaba, él salió a buscar a este pequeño organismo y con apoyo de su teléfono grabó un pequeño video en el cual nos pudo comprobar que no era una salamandra el que emitía este canto, sino una pequeña rana. Esta confusión ocurre en varias partes del centro de México donde se distribuye este pequeño animalito, ya que tanto ranas como salamandras se habitan en zonas húmedas, por lo cual es la confusión, ya que se encuentran debajo de rocas o debajo de troncos o incluso debajo de las macetas. Hasta la fecha no existen estudios que nos comprueben que las salamandras emitan sonidos o emitan cantos, caso contrario de las ranas, que emiten sonidos gracias a sus cuerdas bucales o sacos bucales, que esto lo ocupan para poder llamar a sus parejas o para poder proteger sus territorios.
Entonces no ha de ser o es igual su sonido.
Como una ranita, pero ¿y si es el que chilla? No es. Porque los que hay acá son alargaditos, o sea, como una lagartija.
No se parece. El sonido sí. El sonido sí.
Sí, esas son como ranas, pues no son las que vi, pero son crías, creo yo, las que vi, porque son así. Sí. Son ranas, no me están engañando.
No,
Esas
mami,
son ranas.
no ves que nosotros decimos que son las salamandras, pero no son, mira. Qué bien, mami. Ahora ya las conoces. Mira, son esas. Nosotros decimos que son las que tú dices, yo también, y mira, no es rana.
Son ranitas, pero sí hay hartas de esas. Allá en el plan hay hartas de esas, pero hartísimas. De esas, y así como las ves son verdecitas, ponen como moradito. Hay hartas allá en el plan.
Es una rana. Y yo creí que era porque tiene hace el mismo sonido. Y de hecho hasta hay un pájaro que chilla igual. Ah, ya. Me fui con esa idea.
Ah, yo pensé que era un pájaro. Es que también así canta.
Esta ranita que hace el sonido conocido como Tsurumpitpit, comúnmente conocido como rana chirredora, mide 2.5 centímetros, es color verde con manchitas negras. Ni salamandras ni ranas son animales peligrosos, sin embargo son de suma importancia ya que se alimentan de pequeños insectos que pueden ser vectores de enfermedades o pueden producir plagas. Por ello, estudiar su ecología es importante para su conservación.
El entendimiento de la naturaleza evoluciona y cambia con el tiempo. Para nuestros abuelos, el Tsurumpitpit seguirá siendo una salamandra, pero para las nuevas generaciones, la imagen que acompaña su canto podría ser la de una rana. Lo más importante es que el canto del Tsurumpitpit seguirá acompañando las noches lluviosas de la sierra.
I've been fishing on chalk streams since I was a young boy. And when you're young, fishing is very much about catching fish. But as you get older, I think you get to respect your quarry more. And you get to understand the beauty which the chalk streams bring to the English countryside. Certainly for me, with every passing year, I love the rivers more and more. They mean more and more to me. It's just a whole beautiful microcosm of rural life, all evolved and set amongst this wonderful river. I never really thought they would be anything other than permanent. You know, that I just arrived and they were there and I fished them and I always assumed they would be there forever. But clearly there are so many pressures on this crowded little bit of England that somehow you have a duty to try and preserve them. And it sounds a trope, you know, you have to, you know, preserve them for the next generation, but you really do. I mean, someone preserved them for me, and I need to do something to preserve them for the next generation, because, you know, as we know, these are incredibly special. They don't exist anywhere else, and once they're gone, they're gone. Chalk streams, they are entirely the product of man. If you could come back to the chalk stream region, if you say we're here 2,000 years ago, you'd just be in the middle of a swamp. But what happened was, because of the way the geology was laid down after the Ice Age, it left this very fertile soil, which was great for farming. And of course, early man soon worked this out, that if they could find some way of draining the bog to create farmland, it would be very productive. And so that's what happened. And what has happened over a course of 2,000 or 3,000 years is the bog has been drained, and the drains are what we call today our rivers. And you do notice that if a chalk stream is just left to go back to nature, you get a far less diverse collection of wildlife. You get a monoculture of a particular type. For instance, in the river itself, you just get this monoculture of particular types of weed and reed that block it. Whereas if you maintain it the way we do, we get a much greater diversity of flora and fauna. So I decided not only was I going to be a fisherman, I was going to be a river keeper. Well, I was, at this point, maybe 12 or 13. I was barely old enough to stand up in the river, let alone hold a scythe. So, you have to cut the weed in the river. It's one of the river management things, and someone had either told me about it or I'd read about it. So I decided I was going to cut the weed. So I literally just found an old scythe in one of our barns on the farm, got into the river and started cutting the weed. I mean, I had absolutely no bloody idea what I was doing. And, I was so hopeless at it, and so my love of chalk streams grew out of not just the fishing, but having this opportunity to actually look after them, and that's probably stayed with me for all my life. I mean, I love fishing, but I love the rivers much, much more. thing is, if you stood on a bridge, looked down at a chalk stream, any chalk stream today, you think that looks absolutely perfect. Flowing, clear. The difficulty is that within that clear water, there's an awful lot of pollutants. The pollutants that are in the water today are far more toxic than they were, certainly in the early years when I started fishing. I mean, as a kid, I gaily drank chalk stream water when I was thirsty. I'm not so sure I'd do that today. Because chalk streams don't exist in a vacuum. When you save the chalk streams, you're not just saving the chalk streams. It's part of the British countryside, and the things that are wrong with chalk streams really apply to the whole of the British natural landscape. If we can cure the pollution issues we have on chalk streams, it will apply everywhere. If we can apply the same principles about agriculture, that can apply everywhere. If we can apply the same principles of water use, that can apply everywhere. And the simple fact is that if you keep pressurizing the natural environment, eventually it will snap. I don't think I love the rivers most for fishing. I think I love them because they're rivers. And I know in my heart of hearts, if for some reason I was taken away from the chalk streams forever, it wouldn't be so much that I miss the fishing, I miss the rivers.
Sono sempre stato dalla parte della natura della mia terra, da giovane quando ero cacciatore e poi da adulto con la macchina fotografica. Sono stato testimone della scomparsa dei grifoni da gran parte della Sardegna. Le carcasse avvelenate, lasciate dai pastori per combattere cani randagi e volpi, ne hanno uccisi a centinaia. Eppure, pastori e grifoni convivono in Sardegna da sempre. La nostra isola ospita quasi la metà di tutte le greggi che ci sono in Italia. Nella pastorizia la morte dei capi di bestiame è frequente. La legge prevede un costo per lo smaltimento delle carcasse. I pastori sono quindi obbligati a pagare per il loro incenerimento, a meno che non risaldino il loro legame con i grifoni, che in natura proprio di questo si occupano. Smantellando le carcasse svolgono un ruolo fondamentale per l'ecosistema. oggi in Sardegna ne è rimasta solo una colonia. La sua sopravvivenza è legata alle pecore e ai pastori che le allevano. Mi chiamo Domenico Ruiu, sono nato e vivo in Sardegna e faccio il fotografo naturalista. Il primo grifone l'ho fotografato nel sopramonte di Oliena circa 40 anni fa. Da allora mi sono dedicato allo studio della conservazione della fauna e dell'ambiente della mia isola. In particolare ho studiato in grandi rapacci, soprattutto i grifoni. In questo tratto di costa, che unisce le marine di Bosa e di Alghero, è sopravvissuta l'unica colonia dei grifoni della Sardegna, che è anche l'unica colonia autoctona rimasta in Italia. La situazione della colonia è stata sempre molto oscillante, 10 o 20 coppie al massimo, la colonia cresceva, poi succedeva l'incidente che causava il crollo numerico, incidente legato soprattutto all'utilizzo del veleno da parte dei pastori per combattere volpi e cani randaggi. Questo nonostante siano stati tentati diversi interventi per rafforzare e salvaguardare la colonia, tutti più o meno falliti. In questo contesto ha avuto un ruolo davvero fondamentale il progetto Life sotto le ali del grifone, che tra le tante iniziative prevedeva la creazione dei carnai aziendali. I carnai aziendali sono delle piccole porzioni di terreno delimitati da una recinzione elettrica. Sono l'anello di congiunzione tra il grifone e il pastore. I carnai aziendali, infatti, svolgono un ruolo fondamentale dal duplice aspetto. Da una parte, gli allevatori hanno la possibilità di smaltire le carcasse del loro bestiame lasciandole a disposizione dei grifoni. Dall'altra parte, i grifoni possono contare su una fonte di cibo sicura ed abbondante nel loro territorio. Il pasto dei grifoni è un rituale primitivo di movenze, minacce, soffi, grugniti, fatto per stabilire qual è il soggetto in quel momento più affamato che ha diritto di cibarsi. Questo rappresenta un grande vantaggio per la colonia, perché in questo modo possono cibarsi tutti e nessun esemplare rimane escluso. Gli avvoltoi in generale e il grifone in questo caso svolgono un ruolo fondamentale in quanto eliminano dall'ambiente le risorse trofiche in decomposizione. Un animale che muore e rimane sul terreno è infatti una fonte di tanti rischi e può essere causa di infezioni, epidemie ed altro. Alla fine del pasto, della carcassa non rimangono che la pelle e le ossa perfettamente pulite. Ancora una volta hanno svolto alla perfezione il loro ruolo di spazzini della natura.
Questo carnaio che sono stato al fatto, ogni fiato che muore, la leamo e che la ponimo dentro su carnaio. So il bentulzo, in giro di un'ora che pigiano tutto. E danno una zuata a noi, a livello economico è fatica. E io so che mandicano e campano. Anzi, hanno pure aumentato Una volta mi fui costare scontati, adesso una trentina. Come bisogna dare 80, se ne può contare, ne so 80. Hanno incrementato bene.
I grifoni sono le sentinelle del benessere dell'ecosistema. La loro presenza è necessaria per l'equilibrio del nostro ambiente. Salvare le loro vite equivale a salvare le nostre. Oggi il progetto LIFE sta finalmente dando i suoi frutti. Ed è una grande gioia vedere gli avvoltoi conquistare nuovamente i loro cieli. Anche quest'anno, dai nidi di Capo Marrargiu, alcuni giovani hanno spiccato il loro primo volo. Questa è la loro terra, la terra dei grifoni.
Imagine the beautiful streams filled with poison. Imagine billions of fish disappearing, not being able to live in this water. Imagine all of the wildlife that depend on these fish disappearing with them. For the last 20 years, conservationists from all over the country have been trying to stop a mine from being constructed in Bristol Bay, Alaska. According to the owners of the proposed Pebble mine, the project would provide long-term economic benefits from employment and income in the region and state. However, many Alaskans are worried that the mine would harm the wildlife and ecosystem of the Bristol Bay area. Over the years, a Stop Pebble Mine movement has formed to oppose the mine.
The risks from large-scale mining development are far too great for the native people of this land. We will never trade our flourishing lifestyle for short-term interests of a foreign mining company. My name is Dolores Larson. I am the Community Engagement Director for United Tribes of Bristol Bay. Every aspect of our subsistence lifestyle would be affected by Pebble. Our entire lives revolve around our unique way of life. We share a deep connection to our pristine lands, waters, air, and all the natural and renewable resources, the fish, wildlife, wild vegetation, berries, and birds. With every season comes food on the table and that sense of security.
Many people, like Dolores, have been working to stop the Pebble Mine for 20 years. The proposed location is in southern Alaska, near Bristol Bay. Bristol Bay and the surrounding areas are rich with wildlife and salmon.
If constructed, the Pebble Mine would be the largest open pit gold and copper mine in North America. In addition to the giant hole in the ground, which would be the mine, the project would require a transportation system, a road system, and a pipeline that would extend for miles over the uninterrupted tundra and wetlands and streams of the Bristol Bay region. Bristol Bay is one of the last great salmon systems in the world. Bristol Bay produces about half of the red or sockeye salmon consumed in North America.
Bristol Bay is home to one of the last great salmon systems. People from all over the world came together to stop the Pebble Mine and protect Bristol Bay and all the salmon that live there.
People from the region, the tribes from the region, commercial fishing groups, sport fishing groups, conservation organizations, groups that are interested in sustainable food production and healthy fisheries and other things. So a coalition grew up to oppose the mine.
The Stop Pebble Mine Coalition was formed to help stop the Pebble Mine and protect the region from many negative impacts the mine would create.
Most directly are the species that depend on the water. You would have dozens of miles of streams dug up or dewatered. So we would have all types, 5 species of Pacific salmon. We would have trout and Dolly Varden and grayling. And then, of course, the wildlife all depend on the salmon for nutrients. So the bears and the caribou and the eagles and all the birds, really, like, it starts with the nutrients. The whole system starts with the nutrients the salmon bring upriver. So it would have a lot of effect on the fish and wildlife in the area.
In January of 2021, the permit for the proposed Pebble Mine was denied.
The Pebble Mine was stopped because people from all parts of the country, and most importantly, people from the communities closest to the Pebble deposit, spoke up. I think this is an issue that's an Alaska issue, but it's also a national issue, and every voice counts.
Colour is all around. Almost every animal on the planet uses colour in one way or another. But there is one colourful phenomenon that has been baffling scientists for over 100 years. Iridescence is a phenomenon that causes the colour of an organism to change depending on how light falls on it. Just how a CD changes colour as you tilt it from side to side. iridescence can be found in hundreds of thousands of species across the world, from birds to butterflies and even to deep-sea mollusks. But the reason that so many animals have iridescence has been a mystery to scientists until now.
So my name is Dr. Karin Kärnsmo. I work in the Camo lab at University of Bristol. I specialize in finding out why do animals look and behave the way they do? Why do they have these amazing color patterns that they have? How have these evolved, and what is the function of these color patterns? Iridescence is found in such a huge variety of animals. You can see it in many different types of birds, for example, such as the peacock, where the males have these amazing elaborate ornaments that are iridescent. They are trying to attract the attention of a potential mate. Then the existence of iridescence in those cases is driven by something called sexual selection. In many types of beetles, the males and the females, they look exactly the same. So both the males and the females will be iridescent from top to toe. And in those cases, it is very likely that iridescence serves another function. I think the most convincing cases when iridescence serves a function that is not to attract a mate and it's not to signal to attract a mate is when we find iridescence in non-reproductive life stages of an animal, such as in beetle grubs or in butterfly chrysalises. So in those cases, in those stages of the animal's life cycle, they are not sexually reproductive. So in that case, they can't use iridescence to signal to a mate. But what they can do is, and what they really need to do, is to avoid getting eaten by their enemies.
But how can such brilliant and metallic colors help an animal from getting eaten?
We wanted to investigate whether iridescence could actually provide a survival benefit to prey. What we did was that we used real iridescent and non-iridescent models of the jewel beetle in our experiment. So we started off by placing these different iridescent and non-iridescent models out in a forest setting. So we could go out and see which ones of these models had been attacked by birds and which ones remained unattacked, which ones had survived, basically. What we found was that the iridescent ones survived better than the non-iridescent against predation by birds. So this is amazing because it shows that there's a survival benefit to being iridescent compared to being non-iridescent.
But why did the birds prefer the solid beetles over the bright and shiny ones? There are two potential reasons that the birds did not eat the iridescent models. Either iridescence serves as a form of warning coloration, also known as aposematism. Or iridescence acts as a form of camouflage.
So in order to try to disentangle whether the iridescent models survive better due to camouflage or due to aposematism, we redid the study, but with humans as surrogate predators instead. So we had humans walk around in the woods and search for these iridescent and non-iridescent beetle models. We tend to think of ourselves as not so easily fooled. So when I showed the targets before the experiment took place, they were like, oh, okay, this is what we're looking for, this is what they look like. And I think all of them said, oh, that's going to be easy to spot, basically. And then what we found was that actually humans were surprisingly bad at spotting the iridescent models. They only spotted, I think, 17% of the iridescent ones, whereas they spotted about 75% of the non-iridescent models. So that proves that iridescence, one, serves as a survival benefit to protect them against predation by birds, but then also, two, it shows that the reason why the iridescent beetles survived is because of camouflage and not because of warning coloration. I think that the thing that's most surprising to people is that when you think of an iridescent beetle, such as a rose chafer or a jewel beetle, and you put it in the palm of your hand, or if you see it in a well-lit museum case, it stands out like a sore thumb, basically. And it's hard to imagine how something that's that brilliant and amazingly colored can actually work as a form of camouflage. But when you put it in its natural habitat, in a dappled forest environment, it blends in perfectly. I really hope that the next time that you're out for a walk in the woods or even in your own garden, that if you spot a beetle, then you'll be fascinated by why it looks the way it does. And now that you know that camouflage doesn't always have to look dull in order to work, that camouflage can actually be both brilliant and changeable.
Road building and fisheries, you tend not to think of yourself as partners. Yet if you get into most road crews, you've got fishermen, and if you get it down to that basic element, there's no reason you shouldn't partner up quite naturally. My name's Steve Klatt. I'm the Road and Bridge Director for Bonner County.
Hi, my name's Ken Bowens with the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. I'm a mitigation staff biologist. The primary thing that I do is work with the Clark Fork Settlement Agreement. Trestle Creek is one of the major bull trout spawning streams to the Pend Oreille system. 10, 15 years ago, about half of the production of the whole Pend Oreille system came from Trestle Creek. Those numbers have been slowly trickling down a little bit. They're still significant, but over time, we haven't been getting quite as many bull trout up into Trestle Creek as we used to. So I started thinking about why is that happening. One of the things that I noticed Although there's a lot of main stem riffle habitat in Trestle Creek, one thing that we don't have is a lot of side channel, slow water habitat. Juvenile bull trout, specifically young of the year fish, generally like the real shallow nearshore water. Generally waters that are moving less than 1 foot per second. And given that Trestle Creek's in a steep valley, we don't have a lot of that. That process was going through my head right about the same time that Bonner County was applying for a grant with Federal Highways to repave the road here. So we literally jumped in the truck when they were having a scoping meeting and went for a ride with them.
What's really is remarkable is when you find a project that brings together trying to enhance, protect the fishery and trying to enhance and protect the road. It's been a great opportunity to work together with Fish and Game and with Federal Wildlife Services, that a road enhancement project can also be a stream stabilization project, and they can work well together.
One of the things that's kind of cool is we were able to get in on the front end of this project, which doesn't happen often. We then are part of the design team for their road work. So beyond what we're doing in stream, we also have some input on what they're going to do later when we come in. So we were able to put habitat into the project. We were able to move the creek away from the road, so when they come in and do their armoring, it won't impact the creek nearly as much as it would otherwise. The project was funded through Avista and the Clark Fork Settlement Agreement. And then once we got the initial funding going, we hired RibHab, which is a engineering firm out of Boise, and Jean McFall's the primary engineer with that. She did the engineering on the job.
Hi, my name is Jean McFall. I'm the hydraulic fisheries engineer working on the Trestle Creek project. We designed this log jam in one of the steepest sections where it was up to 8% grade, and the water was rushing down this boulder chute and heading straight towards a bend in Trestle Creek Road, causing all sorts of erosion, causing problems for the county. And what we ended up doing is upstream from there, creating this massive log jam using these incredible trees that Todd was able to fell and locate into place and construct a log jam, so it pushed all of that water up onto the floodplain. And in the end, there was just water all over. I mean, water was flooding the whole floodplain, which is really exciting because that's what the juvenile bull trout need.
Douglas Construction and Custom Cutting were the contractor on the job. Both did a phenomenal job, and it was a real success.
You're working in the stream, you're working in the riparian zone, which is awesome. And we both love fishing and hunting and the outdoors and preserving, for future generations.
So one of the hardest things about a project like this is not necessarily actually doing the in-stream work, but getting ready to go. And it took about 2 years to get the funding in order and get the permitting done so we could actually go to work. When we started to go to work, there's environmental monitoring that we have to do, because when you're digging, you're stirring up the bottom and you're making the water a little bit muddy. In a stream like this with Trestle Creek, literally within 5 or 10 minutes after we do the work, the water's cleared up. The other thing we do is before we even start work, we go through with an electrofishing crew, remove as many of the fish as we can from the project reef so we don't directly impact those fish. So one of the things, as we've been working here this week, we've had several residents and people stop by and look at it. And the first thing that they look at is they look at it and they're like, boy, that's messy. From a fish perspective, messy is good. It creates the complexity and the things that really do create good fish habitat and help fish grow.
Creating all of this complex, different habitat areas with grasses and trees and root wads, all of those roughness elements work to slow the water down, spread it out, create this huge increase of habitat.
It's interesting because here we are, a week after we're done, and I'm just looking in the water next to me and I'm seeing juvenile fish swimming in the little pools that we've already created. We've got an overall positive thing going on.
Hey friends, welcome to Morgan's edition. Hey friends, welcome to a winter edition of Morgan's Nature Notebook. Today, we're out here on the beautiful Bridger Teton National Forest, which just so happens to be ancestral lands of the Eastern Shoshone, Bannock, and Cheyenne tribes. Today, we're out here cross-country skiing, and we're keeping an eye out for signs of winter wildlife. We're gonna go over some fun winter tracking tips and also learn about how we can help give wildlife the space they need to survive it through the long winter ahead. Let's go! So one thing you can watch out for is the difference between prints and trails. A lot of times with all the snow we get out here, it's really uncommon to find a really clear print. So instead, we look for trails and we start asking ourselves, what kind of story does this trail tell us? In this case, we've got a bounding track. All the feet are landing in the same area, one after the other in a sequence. And what we can see is that they come out of a hole, cross this ski track, and then jump up onto a tree. So we can ask ourselves, what kind of animals live in holes and trees in the wintertime? Hey Phoebe, what was that animal we saw back by the trailhead?
A squirrel!
Wow, check out this trail right here. There's this massive crater in the snow. I'm pretty sure this is a moose bed. Oh, well, what makes you think it's a moose bed? Look at the size of this. It's huge. And actually, if you look a little bit closer, there's these dark hairs in it. Well, let's follow the trail a little bit more and see if we can collect any more clues to prove that it's a moose. Oh, definitely a moose. We've got some moose poop here. Another part of the story is the browse associated with the trail. We've got fresh browse, I can tell, because this wood is green right here. And there's another one up here. And I'm a pretty tall guy, and I can't reach that with my mouth. There's only one animal around here that would be able to reach up here with its mouth. That's a moose. So this is a really good example of a moose track right here. And I'm gonna define a couple terms that can help us really narrow down what type of track it is. The first one is stride. Stride is the distance between any one foot where it gets picked up and the next place it gets put down. We can measure that distance to get a sense of how big the animal is from its shoulders to its hips. Straddle is the width of a trail from the far side to the other side. Straddle gives us an idea of how wide the animal is. These can be really helpful in telling the difference between deer, elk, and moose. You might think this little lodgepole pine here looks like Charlie Brown's Christmas tree, but something I'm noticing is this scraped off bark right here. A lot of you know what a buck rub is. This is an area where an ungulate, probably a deer, came through and rubbed its antlers. That's another sign you can look at for wildlife. The thing you want to look for is how high off the snow is it. This one right here kind of looks like a mule deer probably came by and rubbed its antlers on it. It's a little low for an elk or a moose. Oh. Man, this is tough to get around in, and I've even got skis on. If it's this hard for me to get around, I can't imagine how hard it is for a moose or anything else out here to get around. I can always go home and eat a big plate of bacon. They have to stay out here and eat twigs. It's a good reminder to give them the space they need to not stress them out so they can make it through this long winter ahead. Another thing I like to do is to make sure to keep my dog friends on their leashes. Even though they mean well, sometimes they can't help themselves and they get up ahead of me and chase wildlife.
Hey Phoebe, how do you find Will Smith in the snow?
I don't know, Morgan. How?
Look for the fresh prints!
Until next time, stay curious and enjoy some winter tracking.
One morning, I happened to spot a nest on a jamun tree outside my window. The tree is locally called as Nerle in Kannada. I wondered which bird's nest could it be. While I was still wondering, down she came in the blink of an eye, and in a flash she leaves.
Ah, a sunbird.
I could figure out that she had spent a lot of time building her home. It's made of twigs, coir, cobwebs, and dry leaves in an intricate pattern. Well, that was some architecture right there. She then begins to inspect her newly built nest, making sure it is perfect in every way. One morning, I see the usually active sunbird to be quite indolent and fixed to her nest. That's when I realized our mama bird was incubating. These purple-rump sunbirds, also known as suraki in Kannada, are endemic to the Indian subcontinent. They are tiny birds with mid-length, down-curved bills. The females are olive above and yellow to buff below. This species is found in a variety of habitats with trees, including scrubs, cultivation lands, and urban areas. Coming back to the incubating mother, she endures every challenge that nature throws at her. She's almost like a monk in deep penance, sitting through every single hurdle, be it sun, wind, or storm. Mother 1, Nature 0. After a few days, I observed that the mother was flying in and out of the nest. Looking closer, I saw the mom feeding, which means, voila, the chicks are out. Welcome to the world, little friends. Feeding these ever-hungry chicks is a Herculean task. After rigorously feeding her chicks, the mama bird seems to be taking some time off. Oh wait, who's that? It's a male purple-rumped sunbird, their father. The males have dark maroon upper side and a blue-green crown. They have whitish underparts and a purple patch on the throat. It has a purple rump generally hidden under its wings, which gives the bird its name. The father takes up equal responsibility in feeding and raising the chicks, being all chivalrous. These birds usually feed on nectar, but also prey on insects, particularly while feeding the young. As the chicks grow older, they become more playful, which means these little ones need a lot more, and that demands some extra toiling from the parents. Wait, did she take something off the nest? The mother is on potty duty. She seems to be collecting the excreta directly from the back end. With the chick's assistance? That's quite surprising, right? Well, Parenting 101. The fully grown chicks are now starting to get curious about the outside world. Well, until now, they were in safe hands, or should I say, safe wings. They begin to make smaller but bolder moves, preparing themselves to venture out and live an independent life. Their first flight seems to be nearing. But it was nearer than I had thought. One fine morning, they were gone before I was up. I was in mixed emotions. My soul was filled with equal parts joy that they headed towards their own journey, and equal parts sadness as I'd miss watching them from my balcony. I'm extremely happy to have been a part of their journey and to have witnessed this spectacle firsthand. Like most encounters in nature, the experience is short-lived, but the memory goes with you to the grave. And now, every time I look out of my window, all I see is a world full of possibilities and an empty nest.
In the wild west of Scotland on the Isle of Rum, a lone red deer stag heads over the hills. His name is Wisdom 11, and as summer closes, this signals the beginning of the rut. Having left the woods, he crosses the mountains and rivers, returning to Kilmorey Bay to take up his post as Sheriff of the Rut. It's now early October at the peak of the rut, and Wisdom 11 has lassoed a large harem and is the stag to beat in Kilmorey. Here he is, the stag of Kilmorey, Wisdom 11. He stands tall and is wore a badge, letting all know he is sheriff in these parts. Our sheriff's roar keep his rivals at bay, but they want his harem. Around him they have scuffles in their frustration. Unlike them, he saves his energy, a key to his success as sheriff. So while most stags find little time to rest, our sheriff finds time for a nap. An outlaw, with one of the loudest roars in the glen. He tries to retract a female, but he does not holster the weaponry needed. Despite this, he does not shy away from a brawl. Despite victory, this stag will most likely never mate. Few can hold a harem like Wisdom 11, but one thing is for sure. Tension is rising. Wisdom 11 has saved his energy, ready to protect his harem as things heat up on Rum. But will it be enough for our sheriff? The hinds and calves graze throughout the rut, preparing for winter. Unlike the stags who rarely eat. Wisdom 11 has sensed a change in his harem, so he rides out, bringing his harem in close to protect them from bandits. With a large harem, he has first choice when his hinds come into season. Wisdom 11 has control of his territory, attracting females and scaring off rivals with ease. What will the Wild West have in store for our sheriff in the days ahead? At the end of the first week of October, things have reached fever pitch for our stag and deer in Kilmorey. 3 of his hinds have come into season. He's had his way with 2 of them already. But their heavy scent is in the air, and it has attracted the attention of a bandit. And he wants rid of our sheriff. Wisdom 11 and the bandit size each other up. Our sheriff draws first, ready for the challenge. The bandit has fled, and Wisdom 11 can ride off into the sunset.